Chapter 19. Trapped! The chest was heavy, as Nancy soon discovered. She could not drag it out alone, so Ned and Matt pulled it to the middle of the room. "You found it, Nancy," Ned remarked. "You should open it." In a jiffy, she had lifted the lid, and they all stared at the contents. "The stolen papers!" Matt exclaimed. Inside lay a sheaf of blueprints and several large hardcover books containing typed material. Matt quickly examined a few of them. "This is the stolen formula," he said. "And here is Dr. Larimore's name." The three searchers agreed that they should take all the papers with them, but they were too large to be put into pockets, and there was no bag or small suitcase in sight. "We'll have to take the chest," Nancy stated, "and deliver it to the police as fast as we can." "Right," said Ned. "Matt, I guess you and I can carry this between us." In the meantime, Nancy had taken several books out of the chest and was gazing at some objects in the bottom. "What are these things?" she asked. Matt examined them and said they were parts of equipment for manufacturing the formula. "It won't be necessary to take these. If we leave them here, the chest will be lighter." Carefully, the various gadgets were laid on the floor under the bench, and the searchers got ready to leave. Ned warned that they had better hurry. "The men might spot us walking through the woods and make trouble. Don't you think it would be better for us to hide the chest nearby and bring the police to the spot?" Matt suggested. Nancy said that if they hid the chest in the woods, rain might soak through it and ruin the papers. "No matter what we do, let's get out of here," Ned insisted. "You go first," Nancy told him. As he and Matt lifted the chest, Ned said, "I believe I can carry this on my shoulder." He swung the chest up and started to climb the rope ladder. At that instant, they heard George give the special bird call. "The men are coming back," Nancy whispered. "Hurry! We mustn't be caught here." Matt stepped behind Ned and helped him steady the chest. Nancy waited at the foot of the ladder. She was certain their combined weight might break it. Just then, the bird call came again. Bert, crouched at the edge of the pit, quickly told his friends they could escape if they would hurry. In the next second, everything seemed to happen at once. Two strange men had come down a mountain trail. One knocked Bert into the pit. The other grabbed the chest. Both men shook the ladder, causing Ned and Matt to fall off. Instantly, the attackers pulled the ladder up. The camouflaged cover was slammed shut, and something heavy was rolled on top of it. "A rock!" Nancy cried out. "We're trapped!" It took only a few seconds for the young people to collect their wits. Nancy said, "Quick! Ned, hop onto Matt's shoulders and try to get out of here." Ned did this, but his steady pressure against the trapdoor could not lift it. He climbed down. "I wonder where George is," Nancy said. Bert was extremely worried. "We've got to get out of here," he declared. This time, he and Ned climbed onto Matt's shoulders. By pushing hard, they were able to move the obstruction a little. Then suddenly it burst open. Bert raised himself out and looked around. George was not in sight. "George!" he shouted. There was no answer. Nancy swung up to Matt's shoulders and climbed out. She also called her chum's name. Still, there was no reply. She berated herself for having urged the trip and the search. If only it had occurred to her that pals of the renegade scientists might come to the pit. Who were the men? She asked Bert to describe them. The description of one fitted the man in woodsman's clothing who had met the girls the first time they had gone up the mountainside. The other attacker was unfamiliar. The rope ladder was lying on the ground. Bert set it in place. Ned and Matt climbed out. Anxiously, Nancy and her companions discussed what had happened to George. Had she been kidnapped by the men, and was one or the other responsible for trying to abduct Bess and knocking out Dave? Once more, they called George's name, but as before, there was no answer to their frantic summons. They searched a wide area, but could not find her. "I'm going to the police," Bert announced. He started down the path toward Natty Bumppo's cave. The others followed. They kept flashing their lights to see if there was any sign of George. They found no shoe prints or any marks on trees, a method Nancy, Bess, and George sometimes used to indicate a trail they had taken. "Now what are we going to do?" Bert sighed as he paused several feet from the cave entrance. Almost at once, Bert caught sight of something gleaming in a clump of grass. Without speaking, he pointed toward it. Nancy and Ned followed him to the spot. Before them lay a metal comb. "This might belong to George," Nancy said hopefully, and stooped to pick it up. "There are a few dark strands of hair still on it." "I'll bet she's being held in that cave," Bert interjected, with mounting concern. Ned was less convinced. "Someone else could have dropped the comb," he said. "It's only a hunch, but—" Nancy started to say as they edged closer to the cave entrance. "What is?" Ned whispered. For the moment, she had decided to reveal no more. "Come on, tell us," Bert begged anxiously. By this time, they were flashing their lights inside the pitch-black cave. "Why all the suspense?" Ned asked finally. "Do you think anything serious has happened to George?" Nancy smiled faintly. "Oh, you know me and my hunches. Sometimes they're wrong." "Your batting average is pretty high, I'd say," Ned answered. "You could be nominated for the Baseball Hall of Fame yourself." Nancy, whose thoughts were solely on George, did not reply to his quip. Instead, she said fearfully, "I hate to tell you my hunch, but it certainly looks as if those men have kidnapped George." In a short time, they reached the road, and all of them exclaimed in surprise. Nancy's convertible was gone. Ned said angrily, "First those guys take the chest and kidnap George, then steal your car." "But how could they drive it?" Matt asked. "Don't you have the keys with you, Nancy?" She nodded, but said that both George and Bess carried duplicate sets. Perhaps George had them in a pocket. Bert groaned. "I get the whole picture now. Those men forced her down to the car by another route and made her hand over the keys. All the more reason why we should go to the police." The group started trudging toward the village. They had not gone far when they had to jump to the side of the road. 2 state police cars were roaring along, heading up East Lake Road. "Maybe they've picked up a clue to Doria's accomplices," Ned said hopefully. The words were hardly out of his mouth when they heard another car coming at a fast speed. To their utter amazement, it was Nancy's convertible. Driving it was George Fane. No one else was with her. Instantly, Nancy and the boys began to shout. George applied the brakes and came to a screeching halt a few feet ahead. The others raced toward her and started to ask questions. She cut them short and cried out, "Jump in, quick! I know where the thieves are." End of chapter 19.